community action project, and so our group is 5, and it's kind of like some groups have 4, some groups have 6, and so you either did a media campaign, a fundraiser, a protest, or a panel discussion, and so our group is doing a media campaign. So we chose to focus on the Canada 150 celebrations and the Indigenous heritage that leaves out, and we wanted to raise awareness and educate about the resilience of Indigenous people and how that's really not brought to the surface with the Canada 150 celebrations. So our campaign is called Beyond 150 because we wanted to go beyond 150 and kind of bring that out to the public. So we have a Facebook page right now, and we have done a video on there. We just put up posters this morning. We've talked to David and Melda Purley, Dean and Sherman, the rep on the student union, and we've had an interview with the Brunswickan, and they've done an article on us so far. And am I missing one?
So quite a lot.
We've done like just a little bit of everything.
When
but
the speaker that was there,
yes.
that's where we talked to David for the first time.
Yeah, the speaker who came from the University of Winnipeg and did a talk on meeting the TRC's calls to action. So yeah, we just wanted to make sure, like, where none of us have direct Indigenous history, we wanted to make sure that we had kind of approval first of all, and we had insight and knowledge. Before we tried to educate other people, we wanted to be educated ourselves beforehand. So just varying opinions and different perspectives is kind of what we wanted to go for.
Okay, so just to be straight, your focus is on Beyond 150 rather than Canada 150.
Yes.
Okay, and then the question is, what? Because the Beyond 150 is sort of a different kind of focus than Canada 150.
Yeah, so in the questions that Grace had sent to you, most of them were focused on Canada 150, because we wanted to kind of see when people thought of Canada 150, what they thought of and what kind of came to mind for that. And then going off of the knowledge that people have, or the lack of knowledge that people have, kind of how that connects with what we're trying to do, and how we think Canada 150 should be changed or morphed, I guess, to satisfy more than it does.
Okay, all right, okay, then I know the context. Yeah.
Cool, okay, perfect. I'm just going to record. And you said you're okay if Cameron videotapes?
Yeah, that's fine. Do I look at you or in the camera?
You just look at Grace.
Okay.
So just pretend I'm not here.
Okay, so we can ask you the questions that Grace had sent to you first, and then we can kind of move into a little bit more about Beyond 150, if that's okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so the first one she said was, what do you think Canada 150 does?
Okay, what does it do? Good question. For me, Canada 150 is an opportunity for Canadians to celebrate who they are and the land in which they live. Canada is one of the most favorite countries in all the world in which people like to live. It's 5th, I think, on the list of I think UN countries in which people like to live. So that says something, right? That says something about Canada. Canada is a great country. If you've traveled through Canada, you know the vast geography, you know the different kinds of people that live there, and what they're about and who they're about. So this is a chance to celebrate Canada. There is now a Broadway play in New York that is celebrating what the people from Gander, Newfoundland did when the 9/11 planes landed in Gander, Newfoundland, right? And it took the I don't know how many thousands of people were there, took them by surprise. How can this little place that's often regarded as nowhere, Canada, yet do such wonderful things? Well, it's because of the people. Right? And you find pockets of this all over the place, right? So Canada is a beautiful country in which to live. It is a country that consists of largely immigrants, right? The only people that are non-immigrants are the First Nations people. The rest of us, 95% of Canadians, are immigrants, whether from the last year, the last 10 years, the last 100 years, the last 200 or 300 years, right? We're all together. Different colors, different ethnic backgrounds, different worldviews, right? So for us to be a country, to be together, is something to celebrate. And we should do that in the opportunities that we have, right? And so this is an opportunity. Canada's not perfect, right? It's not perfect. There's a lot of flaws. There are a lot of things we don't do right. We have a history that's somewhat checkered, okay? We have dark sides to Canada. Okay, we need to acknowledge those, but there's also times in which we should celebrate things, right? It's easy enough to complain about things, but what's wrong, what's not right, who's not getting what they need, and so forth and so forth. Okay, right? But at times we need to celebrate what Canada is. And I think Canada 150 is a chance for Canadians to come together and to celebrate what Canada is, what Canada offers to so many people. And I think it's worthwhile taking the time to do that very thing. The rest of the time we can complain, that's okay. But these are opportunities. And so I think that it's worthwhile to take this opportunity. I'm for celebrating when we need to celebrate, and times to celebrate the good things that Canada has. And lots of people from many places in the world want to come to Canada because of what Canada has to offer. So let's celebrate that. This is a chance.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. And so the next one is Canada 150 inclusive?
Ah, good question. I don't think any country can be totally inclusive. Because once you ask the question about inclusion, all kinds of things come to the fore, right? But let's start with the good, okay? Some of the celebrations that are taking place are worthy to note because they touch on inclusion. So we have June 21st, National Aboriginal Day. This will be part of Canada 150, right? We have Saint Jean-Baptiste Day, right? Celebrate the uniqueness of Quebec, right? And then we have July the 1st, the big day, right? So we're already talking about three different peoples, three different groupings of people, right? First Nations people, Quebecers, who are already included in this, right? And then what Canada 150 does, it is both a local and a national kind of endeavor. Yes, there will be certain events that will take place, but it is also an opportunity for people who want to do something to do it, right? And people from a variety of different ethnic groupings, cultural groupings, regional groupings, you name it, that can create their own kind of day or time of celebration. And I don't think anyone's going to hold them back, particularly if it's celebrating what they find unique in Canada. So on the webpage, it is encouraging groups to come forward, do something special. And I would think that no one is going to hold back, but will encourage even recent refugees and immigrants to come and celebrate what they have experienced thus far and how pleased they are to be in Canada. And we need to do that. We need to celebrate the good news stories. We need to celebrate why people feel good about coming to Canada. It's also interesting that, and I went on the website just to check some of these things. There were pictures of disabled people, of physically disabled people, intellectually disabled people. Include them. Find ways to include them. Those who work very closely with them. This would be a great time to bring that to the fore. Canada is known in a number of places in the world, particularly in Europe, about being a country that is inclusive of people with physical and intellectual disabilities. Canada was one of the first countries to sign that Declaration of the Rights of people with disabilities. It is on the forefront of some of these things. It's not perfect, but let's celebrate where we have come and where we are now. We can also acknowledge that we still have places to go. There are people, groups, entities that could take this opportunity to include themselves, right? LGBTQ2 groups. I was thinking of another one now; it slipped my mind. But all of these groups are part of what makes Canada special and unique. Come to the fore, celebrate what it means, and I think that people need to be encouraged to also find opportunities to come forward. Women as a group need also to make sure that Canada 150 acknowledges the opportunities that are in this country for women. Yes, it's not perfect, but compared to many other countries, we're not doing too bad, right? And I hope that everyone feels that this is an opportunity for us to try and be as inclusive as possible. So let's encourage one another to celebrate, to come forward, and to be part of this nationwide celebrative event. Yes. Now, if there are those who feel that they're not included, I hope they find ways to include themselves. And I think that the onus is on all of us to try and be as inclusive as possible. Canada is a country of inclusion, right? Again, it's not perfect. There are people who are still not feeling fully included, but this is an opportunity to move forward on that front in a huge way, and I hope that we can do that.
This question isn't one of the ones Grace Pike sent you, is that okay? But it was just based on what you had said there, is that okay? Okay. So just where you said like opportunity to include other groups and other people, do you think that including Indigenous people in the Canada 150 celebrations, I think based on the people we've talked to, they've kind of found ways to adapt to the Canada 150 celebrations and kind of include themselves in that sense. But do you think that in the same way that like LGBTQIA plus or women include themselves, do you think Indigenous people should have to include themselves, or do you think they should already kind of be included in that and shouldn't have to kind of do it for themselves, I guess?
From my perspective, they're already included.
Okay.
I talked about National Aboriginal Day,
Mm-hmm.
right? National Aboriginal Day has gotten a greater and greater profile. The events that take place in so many parts of Canada in and around Aboriginal Day are really special. Powwows held by many different Indigenous groupings are now profiled in ways that they weren't before. So there's already that movement. Here in New Brunswick, it is now well known that these powwows go on in the different regions. And if you do a little bit of homework, if you are sort of sensitive and interested in these kinds of things, you'll know when they take place, right? And I went to one. I went to one last year, the one in Tobic, and I've gone to the one in St. Mary's, and I've gone to other Indigenous events. They are there, and I think there are an increasing number of First Nations people that are feeling more and more and more included. You can speak with David and Imelda Purley, and they're feeling, better about changes that are happening in Canada. And I think that for me, they're automatically included. I would be really not only disappointed but saddened if they were not included, if in any way they felt excluded. Canada, for me, includes First Nations people, without a doubt. John Ralston Saul wrote a book called A Fair Country. And he made the point, and a very, very important point. Canada is founded on 3 nations. We don't know enough about the founding peoples, which are the First Nations people. We need to wake up to that. We need to know more about those things. But without a doubt, Canada is what it is today also because of the First Nations people. We have learned more from First Nations people than we realize. It's in our history. We haven't done well with including them. For a long period of time, there were things going on in which they tried to exclude First Nations people, assimilate them. Not a good thing, right? And First Nations people are rebounding from that. And in a very, very intentional way. They're not going away. And they'll tell you every time, they're not going away. And good, they shouldn't. They are part of Canada. They make Canada rich. And Canada must, the rest of Canada must include them. It's not a debate. So while there is still pain and hardship because of the legacy of the residential schools and so many other things, I understand that. But I hope that as we move forward, we can be a country that is inclusive, and that is inclusive definitely of First Nations people. And First Nations people, their culture, their heritage, their worldview needs to be profiled, and highly so. Yeah.
And then last one, do you think it's beneficial to have non-Indigenous people involved with the Beyond 150 campaign that we're doing?
It depends on what you mean by included.
Okay,
Yeah.
so like the 5 of us who kind of headed up this group as a result of the project, none of us kind of identify as Indigenous with immediate heritage, at least. And so do you think it's beneficial to have us, the ones kind of starting that campaign and the ones taking that initiative on behalf of others, sort of?
Well, I'm not so sure that it's non-Indigenous people that are taking the initiative of Beyond 150. I think there's quite a number of First Nations people involved. There's a big film festival, that's on the West Coast. I have no problem with non-Indigenous people being involved. If the Beyond 150 is about First Nations people, then First Nations people need to take the initiative. And if they feel that a Beyond 150 project is very beneficial to them and helps them to showcase Aboriginal ways of life, etc., then it is up to them really to take the initiative on it. It shouldn't be non-Indigenous people doing it. We've done enough things to First Nations people that is not so good. I think that it is more beneficial for them to head up projects that they think are most important for them. But can non-Indigenous people work with them if they're invited to do so? I would think yes. I would think that any kinds of projects that First Nations people initiate and seek to have non-Indigenous people involved in them, I think that's a good thing. Powwows, for example, are largely about First Nations communities, but there's a standing invitation for non-Indigenous people to be involved, to participate, to join them, and they are hugely beneficial. I've worked with First Nations people on projects and never felt a resistance. It's always, yes, come, join us. But should non-Indigenous people spearhead it? No, I don't think so. First Nations people should spearhead it. And then if we are invited to come along with them, then I think that's a good thing.
Thank you. Did either of you have anything you wanted to
I think that was the last one. Was that the
Yeah.
third one that Grace Pike put?
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess that is it. So thank you so much for taking time to talk to us today. And
Yeah.
yeah.